Hi, and welcome to Tocqueville Talks. My name is Brent Nelsen, and I'm the director of the Tocqueville Center for the Study of Democracy and Society here at Furman University. We're doing something a little bit different than we've done, well, maybe a lot different. And let me introduce my co-host, Beth Larive. We are doing something different today.
Yes, so far we've been interviewing our guest speakers who are very illustrious, and today we're going to be speaking with our very illustrious Tocqueville Fellows here at Furman.
Yeah, so there's a reason why we had to do that, of course. We had a big ice storm here in Greenville in January. We're recording this a couple of weeks after we were supposed to have Yuval Levin of the American Enterprise Institute and Philip Munoz of Notre Dame to come and talk about the Constitution. And the ice kept them from getting out of Washington, D.C., and the university was closed down. So we didn't get to have them. We're trying to reschedule, but we don't know if we'll be able to do that this spring. But all of us read Yuval Levin's new book called American Covenant, where he talks about unity and the Constitution. And we didn't want to let this moment go where we've all kind of thought about these things. So I brought in two of the students that were leading the discussions on this book, and I'll let them introduce themselves. So, Zach, who are you?
My name is Zach Lacombe. I'm a sophomore here at Furman, a politics major.
I'm William Jepsen. I'm a senior with Tocqueville. I'm a politics and Spanish double major.
And you're from different parts of the country.
Yes.
You're from here in South Carolina.
Yeah, from Lexington. Yep, near Columbia.
And I'm from Princeton, New Jersey, but grew up in New York.
So we've got the we've got New England Americans, we've got Southern Americans, and Beth is our token Canadian.
Yes.
But she's also the one that knows most about American political thought because she's taught it before.
I have. I've been really lucky to teach the American founding and the Madison's notes on the Constitution. So I was really excited to see Levin focusing on Madison and bringing up those notes on the constitutional debates. And yeah, so I'm excited to talk about this today.
He quotes Madison a lot and extensively, and they're the only records we have of the constitutional debates, so it's good. But he also uses a lot of the Federalist papers as well.
That's right. And I'm curious to hear what you guys as students have been studying and are thinking about these debates at the founding era, and specifically, like, are you reading the Federalist papers? Are you reading the Constitutional Convention debates in your classes so far?
I have a copy, but it hasn't been opened very often. No, I think mostly we interact with a lot of the Federalist papers that we see in2classes. So, for example, I took constitutional law, so we'll look at the Federalist papers outlining the court. But other than that, whatever Levin mentions in his book, you do a little bit more digging on those. But I think he does a pretty good job of kind of laying it all out for us. So it's a really easy book to kind of follow and read.
Good.
So his arguments are good in that they're simple. But also have a lot of nuances to them, so they're very easy to digest and understand.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what your experience is like with the Federalist papers, because sometimes they're tough. It's older English, and it's kind of hard to get through.
I do think Levin does a good job of, not assuming that the audience has read the Federalist papers before necessarily, and kind of walking you through the arguments. Similar to you, I'm in constitutional law right now.
Okay.
And so, we'll read Hamilton's arguments, Madison's arguments, and I think something that always sticks out to me when I'm reading the Federalist papers or the anti-Federalist papers is that the debates we're having today are not new debates. They've been happening since the beginning of our nation.
Yeah, so let me ask this question, because this is really the question at the core of the book. The question is, how can people act together when they don't think alike? And Levin has this really good setup where he talks about how the 13 colonies, they did this thing with the Declaration of Independence, which split them apart from Britain, but it didn't create anything. All it did is end a relationship. So then they were faced with this daunting task of figuring out how to be a self-governing continent. And they had this image in their head that they needed to be united in some way. And obviously the Articles of Confederation didn't do that job. The Constitution was more the vehicle to bring this disparate people who don't think alike together. But I guess I was wondering, for you three, does that question seem relevant, or is it just an old constitutional debate that doesn't really speak to our time?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's relevant. I don't necessarily know if unity gets brought up in conversation when we talk about it. It's more, okay, like here's a voter with like a single issue, so they're going to vote this way. They're not necessarily thinking about, okay, like I want to have some sort of unity with the people that don't think like me. It's more just like the political action we take is just voting, and it's voting based on like my own self-interest, my own experiences. And I just don't really know if like the general American population thinks about unity in like the Constitution, because before reading this book, I never really thought of the Constitution as like a unifying force. I almost thought of it as a protection, which it is, a protection against the political majorities or just majorities in general and the tyranny of that. But I never really thought it was like a unifying thing. I more thought it was like a protectionist type of document. Yeah.
That's really interesting that you raised that, because if most people's experience of political action is voting, which I think is absolutely correct, then you're voting for your position and other people are voting for their position. So if you're just thinking in terms of voting, it's obviously going to be an us versus them. And one of Levin's points is that we need to also understand that America isn't just about us versus them. It's not a friend and enemy distinction. That's fundamentally what this country is about. It's a friend and friend, maybe a friend that you think has gone astray, but nonetheless still a friend.
Wasn't it Aristotle who said that the friend is the one you want to travel with?
Something you don't want to travel with the enemy.
You don't. I mean, you said it the other way. You don't want to travel with an enemy. But I do think, I think this is really interesting that people don't always think about unity in America, because when I hear politicians, especially at campaign time, they're always, well, they seem to be talking about unity. And I think Barack Obama probably did that more than anybody. You know, we want to be one people, we want to be united, and we need to find ways of, acting together more. It went fine for him for 2 elections, but then it's not been so common to talk about that now.
Right, and the unity that you get from political elites is more unifying their base. Mm-hmm. I mean, at least from my experience, unifying their base. Like, I know if you go to like a Trump rally or something like that, it's like a rock concert. It's like, okay, we're all unified here. We don't really care about what's going on outside of our like tribe. So we're not trying to unify the whole country. We're just unifying who we agree with. And I think that's what Levin points out, is it's really easy to unify. Not really easy. It's easier to unify people if you think alike. But on the flip side of that, what if you don't think alike? And that's the source of our problem, is we can't unify, or we're unable to unify people that don't think like us.
Right. A big point in Levin's book is the danger of limited majorities, that you're only catering to one side. And if you just get that 51%, you're kind of in the clear. But I think that we've seen kind of in the post-Obama era, we're drifting more and more towards that idea of limited majority is all we need, and we don't need as much of a unifying voice, kind of reminding us that we are all citizens of the same nation, that we are all should be striving for similar ideals.
Yeah, I think that's really important. This notion that Zach was talking about, like at the Trump rally, where you're trying to rally your base and build it so that it's 50% plus one vote. That's all you need, and then you get to enact your agenda. I guess that's one view of unity, but I think what Levin is trying to get across is that the Constitution is actually built to create, I wouldn't say super majorities, but extra majorities, so that you have a coalition that's bigger than 50%. It should be closer to 58% or 60%.
Yeah, there's that. And there's also that the Constitution is also meant to direct and channel divisions. And that in itself is a kind of unifying experience. And I know as a Canadian coming to America when I was 23 for graduate school, going to South Bend, Indiana, Notre Dame, and I had never as a Canadian read the American tradition or the American founding documents or anything like that. I don't even know if I'd read the Declaration of Independence. And so I started to read these documents, and the overwhelming feeling that I got reading them was like, wow, Americans are really good at arguing. Like it was just, there were so many different opinions presented at this time, the Revolutionary era time. It wasn't just the opinions against the British. It was then like the Americans amongst themselves, like South Carolinians versus New Yorkers. And then going to read Madison's notes on the Constitutional Convention and seeing all the different debates that they were having coming out of the Articles of Confederation, like should we have term limits? Debates over that. Should we? How are we going to have elections? Is it just going to be popular vote, or are we going to have some sort of, equal representation, not just proportional? Debates over every aspect of this. And they were constantly fighting and making things at the same time. So that's what I got out of this chapter that we were reading, is that somehow the Constitution is capturing this really, I think, unique, as a Canadian again, maybe Americans think everyone is like this, but I don't know that that's the case. This really unique ability to have deep, divisive difference of opinions and still manage to get things done somehow at the end of the day.
Do you think?
Maybe we're not kidding.
Yeah.
At least at the founding, yeah.
Do you think we're still good at that? Do you think we're still good at arguing? Like, even like now?
I do think that, actually, this is an observation that my husband made while he was studying Arabic in Cairo, actually, is that he was meeting people from, my husband is a professor here at Furman, Rob Larrabee, and he was meeting people from all over the world, and he was making different notes about different regions' characters. And he said, you know what the Americans are really good at? They're really good at making arguments. Like, they will give reasons for that. And that was just like 10 years ago. So, I mean, he was noticing it in comparison to Europeans are great at big ideas. You know, they have overarching theories. They're great at generalizations. But the Americans that come in, and maybe they don't, have that quite, high level awareness or something, but darn it, they know how to make an argument and give reasons for things and pull up some evidence for it.
Well, I'm struck, and I was struck throughout the whole book, about how the Constitution is really set up to slow things down and force coalitions to be built. And frankly, all the things that we are frustrated with in the Constitution are the very things that Madison and company would have said, this is what will force them to forge this kind of natural unity, or unnatural unity, really. So like the Electoral College. Like, everybody hates the Electoral College, but Levin says, no, that's actually really important to this huge continent where you've got people spread out, you've got people in cities and people in rural areas, and it privileges more rural states, but it gives them a stake in the whole enterprise. So it builds unity. And the thing about, Congress isn't controlled by one party because they have one vote, except for now. Like, right, the Republicans have a one vote majority in the House, but that's not the way it's supposed to work. You're supposed to build broader coalitions so that you can get stuff through the Senate. So, the filibuster is also one of those things we can get really frustrated at, but it is the key to slowing the process down and forging compromise. My perspective is that Americans don't want that anymore. What do you think?
I would agree. Yeah, I don't know if compromise is the main aim here. I think we like arguing and we like disagreeing, which is good. That can be a positive thing. But
we like winning too.
We like winning, right? We like winning more. So it's always okay. Win this debate. Win the next election. Win whatever you're trying to win. Just win that, and you're not necessarily thinking of the other implications of that.
I think that I look at that with a little bit of caution, because it works as well as the party you want to enact legislation is in power, but as soon as you lose that limited majority, the other side is going to come in and do the exact same thing. And I think Levin points that out, that you have this pendulum that, when one party comes to power, the president, executive orders, first day of office, changes a lot of what the other administration did. And we're stuck in this kind of limbo where we're not making any real big legislative changes. We're just swinging between two different sides, and not making it any further. And I think that Levin makes a very strong argument as to we're not treating the system the way it was designed to work, and we're upset at that fact, but we're not aware that we're treating it that way. So I think we're seeing the system as broken, but in reality, we're not using the system the way it was intended.
Do you think that the American people would accept using the Constitution the way it was intended, or are we just past that point?
That's a really good question.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think that it would be a very tough sell on the American people to say we need to go back to this slower way of doing politics, because that is exactly the problem that people are having. And if we're saying, we have to go back to this way, it'll take time, but eventually we'll get to a point where we're able to build these broad coalitions, I think that people are impatient and don't want that. And so I think it would be a very difficult sell.
Yeah, I can corroborate that, at least anecdotally. The people who I interact with who are more involved in politics than just voting, they're like, we want efficiency. Like, prioritize efficiency over everything else. Some of them don't have trust in the framers and the founders. They actually don't trust what they were saying. So if you don't have, that's what I know. One of the things we don't talk about is like fundamentals that we need to build unity. I think we need trust in the system, in like infrastructure and the institutions we have. If we don't trust those, we're going to try to bypass them. And I think that's what we're seeing, and that's why you have either Congress is really gridlocked, or you have a president coming in and enacting a bunch of quote-unquote reforms or their agenda, because we're not trusting that we can actually get things done in either the legislature or in the states or in like local politics.
I think it might go deeper than that. And this is where I appreciated Levin's argument towards the end about how the American democracy is built on some fundamental assumptions about humanity, particularly the dignity of every single individual. And of course, much of that is based on our Christian heritage, the Imago Dei, the image of the Creator is in every person, which requires everybody to be respected. It seems like we've gotten to the point where we are willing to say there are Americans who are living on this territory that I do not accept as Americans. They are enemy. And I think that's a fundamental change. And I remember I had a conversation with my mechanic, and I loved, he's retired now, but I loved him because we had very different views of politics, but I always knew that he was a serious thinker and that he had a perspective that I needed to hear. And we were once talking about, how people on the West Coast think a particular way, and he was criticizing them, and I was saying, well, it's a big country, and we have to find ways of living together. And he said, well, I don't think so, because I don't think those people are Americans. And I know he didn't mean anything terribly, violent or anything about that, but it was the idea that there are people in the United States that he didn't believe were Americans because of their political positions. That's really hard for a constitution or any human creation to handle that kind of division. I'm just wondering if we've gotten to that point. What does a Canadian think?
Well, I'm struck by the American born critiques of the Constitution, and they've come from a few angles. One of them that I've seen, especially my experience here, has been mostly as like a graduate student or working in academia, and so you see ideas about constitutional interpretation, or like, what does even this old document mean? Like, is this something that each generation needs to just rewrite for themselves? Why do we even have this old written thing that we keep referring to? Shouldn't it be kind of reinterpreted for the needs of the present? And then there's another avenue, which is people that just straight up seem to want to replace the American system of constitutional republicanism with something that is anti that, like socialism or even communism, the warmth of collectivism, as the current mayor-elect of New York would say. And so those are a lot of like really different kinds of tensions to manage than the ones that I see in the American founding when I read it. I don't know how much my perspective is influenced as a Canadian in that, but I do think that the divisions that are kind of within that tradition versus those that are competing traditions, maybe trying to replace that tradition.
How about the traditions on the right? I mean, you mentioned socialism and communism, but I also see, Catholic integralism and those kinds of things where it's just about the exercise of raw power to achieve the common good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's also another aspect to it. And so I'm curious also what you guys as students, like, where do you see we've talked about some of the different sources of distrust in the institutions. Where do you see that coming from most of all? I mean, amongst people your age, like, I assume there's probably not much trust in the institutions.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, just among people our age, we've kind of grown up with, I mean, first of all, political, like, just vitriol being common, and then a system that increasingly just does not seem to be supporting the country, that, no real progress, no real substantive change is taking place. So I would say that, like, we just see the system not working.
Yeah, isn't there something about Gen Z cynicism?
Mm-hmm.
What's that?
I think we're a little more selfish too. As much as I kind of hate to admit that, like, we kind of look at things like, okay, where's the next, like, the step up climbing the ladder in just life, so that when it comes to politics, it's like, okay, what's the most efficient way to get what I want? I really think it might boil down to that. I don't know. What do you think? That's been my experience. Like, I know when I lived in New York State, in the area that I lived in, when I would talk to people about politics, it was more, how do I just get the thing that I want, and not necessarily think about the mechanisms and the different ways and the methods to do that.
Well, that's really interesting that you bring that up, because with the founders, that they were trying to incorporate exactly that, like, that you can pursue self-interest, you can have competing interests, you can have factions, and we can all still manage this, because the ancient Republican Constitution was based on, well, if it's going to work, what do you need? Everyone needs to be willing to sacrifice themselves for the sake of the motherland. You need to have like a shared love of the country that you're willing to put ahead of your own individual pursuits. And so it seems like somehow we are seeing people still living like that today, but for some reason the Constitution is not guiding that or unifying us in spite of that or because of that.
But I don't know if there's like a genuine love for the country that's like incorporates most of the people. I think.
Patriotism has become divisive.
Right. It's an issue that one side will use to win. Right. Mm-hmm. So when you do that, you're not going to unify on that front. At least you're not going to unify on that front if you make it like a one side versus the other side. Like, one side's patriotic, the other side's not. Mm-hmm. But I mean, Levin points that out in the book. He talks about how the patriotism is more like, oh, you either love America or you don't love America, and they're enemies. But a lot of disagreements aren't on things that are American or not American. It is like the American values. And he points to the Declaration of Independence. He's like, we argue about the values in the Declaration, not necessarily American versus non-American values. It's like, to what extent, or like, are we going to prioritize this value or this value, or what does that look like? That's what we argue over mostly. Mm-hmm. That's what Levin argues.
So we've come down to some, deep fundamental disagreements. This Constitution was designed to allow free people to govern themselves. But though there were guardrails in the society, and this is where Tocqueville comes in, right? Tocqueville could see that, well, Americans are, they are definitely committed to materialism, and they're committed to building their wealth, but they're also religious people, and they are interested in some kind of righteousness and doing what God wants. So that's going to check some of those elements. Freedom isn't just doing whatever you want. It's also a part of being responsible to your community. And I think, to me, as I read Tocqueville, if he were walking around today, he would say, wow, they've got the freedom part, but they forgot the guardrails. And he was very well aware of this. He was aware of the tyranny of the majority, which is kind of where we might get it. It's, if you win by one vote, you're a majority and you can tyrannize the rest. But also the possibility of despotism. Because when people begin to think, well, I want my vision of the common good, of what I think society should be like, so I just want somebody to get that done. And whether that's Joe Biden, or whether that's Donald Trump, or whether that's Barack Obama, or it's Marine Le Pen in France, I'm really not going to care so much about the process anymore or the democratic niceties. I got to get what needs to get done. And that then leads and can lead to despotism. So we're on unstable ground,
Well, I think that's the problem. I mean, you just mentioned presidents as like the only way to get stuff done. You have other political figures or political elites that are actually probably closer. They are closer to you than the president, but we don't think about that. Like, I don't go out like, oh, I want my representative in Congress. I'm going to choose my representative in Congress to make change. It's like, no, I'm going to vote in the general election for the president because that's who's going to do what I want or like enact what I want. But there's other political elites that you can utilize, and I just don't know if we're utilizing that enough.
I think that there are also some valid parts to people, wanting this person to enact this change, and I think it comes from, one, the fact that, there has been just like this kind of stalling in Congress and legislation, and that's led to a lot of kind of pent-up emotions, anger at the system not working the way they want it to.
I think it gets back this notion of legitimacy. What right does this government have to rule? And you've got input legitimacy, which is, the fundamental process. Is this grounded in the will of the people or the will of God or whatever? In this democracy, it's the consent of the governed. That's what brings legitimacy to the government. And then output legitimacy. It's got to produce stuff for people. And what I'm hearing both of you say is that there's reason to question input legitimacy. Is this really a democracy that is built on the consent of the governed? We haven't even talked about money and tech oligarchs and all of those people, and we could do more of that. But also output legitimacy, like you all are facing graduation. What kind of economy are you graduating into? That's a huge issue. I understand that. Buying a house, getting married. Those are all expensive things these days. Having children. Beth and I both have 3. and it's an expensive proposition, right? So that's why I think, this book is great at raising these questions. This book is really good at inspiring this kind of debate.
Are there any other solutions besides constitutional unity? Like, that's kind of what my thinking is. Let's say we can't agree that the Constitution has some sort of unity built in. What are the other ways that we can go about this to bring people to create unity that's not Constitution? I guess what I'm saying is, like, do we need the Constitution to create unity, or are there other things we can do? What do y'all think?
I think we need political leaders that are willing to look beyond partisanship and, really represent the constituency that they are a part of, be a voice for those people, but also be aware of the problem that is political polarization and be willing to kind of step above party lines to, work for their constituents to get what they want done and to represent, a form of statesmanship that I think America is losing, and to kind of bring that back.
Yeah, I think it's really devastating for the soul, actually, when you do go out and perform your civic duty and you vote and you think that, you're acting as a good citizen and you think you're voting for one thing, and then you see the representative go off to DC and they're not doing. Like, there's a disconnect. Total, like, what on earth is happening? Like, I didn't vote for this. They're not doing what they said. Or they get there and it seems very clear that this is just, whatever they said during the campaign, they're conducting themselves like, swamp level, business as usual kind of thing. And I just think that really harms people, because there's just a sense of like, I don't have agency. It destroys agency. And what is America if not, like, that's America, right? Like, to have agency, to feel like you can do things productively. Like, even at the very beginning, like, we have these debates. It seems like we're in a gridlock, but still we manage to get things done. Like, and the Constitution came out of that and is meant to guide that process and to formalize it. And so, yeah, I think it does come down to like elected representatives being like made. They have to be made to do what they're, do what they're there to do. I think that's a huge part of it.
Well, I can think of like 5 podcasts we ought to do coming out of this conversation alone. But to end on a positive note, I do think that there are things we can do to reform the system. We might need to reform how we choose candidates. Are primary elections the best way to do that? Or does it yield, more extreme candidates? There are things that we can do in Congress to restore regular order, and maybe the Supreme Court needs to be a little bit more willing to, as Levin puts it, just guard the borders of the Constitution and not be making law. And that goes on both sides. Both the left and the right have been making law through the Constitution, through the Supreme
As a
Court.
Canadian, I could say that does not end well.
Yeah, no, it does not end well. And so, anyway, we can continue this discussion, but I think we'll draw it to a conclusion there. I want to thank Zach and William for coming, and Beth will be back on with another podcast in a week. So thank you all very much.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to Tocqueville Talks. This episode was produced by Audrey Enghauser. Lucy Southwell provided administrative support. The theme music is called The Girl I Left Behind Me, a popular folk song in early 19th century America, here performed by Jacob Taylor Armerding. To learn more about our lecture series and events, our Tocqueville and Beaumont Fellows programs for undergraduates, and to listen to episodes, watch event recordings, or support our work, search on Google for the Tocqueville Center at Furman University. If you enjoyed the episode, please like, subscribe, comment, and share Tocqueville Talks on all your favorite listening services. And visit our YouTube channel for full recordings of past events and episodes. Until next time, goodbye.